Amen. Today we continue our series, The Power of Wisdom. Thus far, we've already looked at ancient wisdom for modern families, the character of the wise, and the finances of the wise, or the wisdom of finances. Today we'll explore the wisdom at work. And in case you've missed the last few weeks, we've come to know through this series that the Book of Proverbs is Israel's wisdom literature. And it's filled not just for wisdom for the ancients, but it's also filled with wisdom for us today. The Book of Proverbs contains several sayings featuring wisdom and implied knowledge that for those who read it, develop practical skills to live well and to live godly lives. Wisdom gleaned from these verses also makes us more godly when we seek to apply this wisdom ourselves and in our contexts, when we allow this wisdom to transform us. But we're not to keep the wisdom we glean and gain to ourselves. The benefit of the wisdom is that it is to be shared with others. The gift of wisdom is that you pass it on. So today, as I mentioned, we'll tackle the wisdom at work. Most of us will work the bulk of our adult lives, and hopefully we would say that the work that we do is meaningful or important to us. Although I am mindful that many of us are just stuck in the rat race on the treadmill, going and going and going, and do not find joy or love in our job or what we do day in and day out. Perhaps, like me, you began your working life as a teenager. When I was 14, I had a paper route. I was the paper girl. Most of those around me were paper boys, but I was ready to go out and deliver those papers. In the cold Ohio snowy mornings, I was grateful for my dad, who helped me when I was a little less excited about my job. I learned a lot of responsibility from that first job and from the responsibility that I was given, including interpersonal skills. Back then, there was no online payment system, so every month I would have to knock on all the doors of the people I delivered papers to in order to get the monthly payment. I learned what it meant to be a good steward because I had to return the money I collected to the employer. And then I had to make decisions. Do I want to save the money that I've earned, or do I want to spend it? A lot of lessons were gleaned and responsibility from that first job that I had. And while it was, of course, not a dream job, as a young girl, it helped me to understand responsibility, and it was a valuable experience that helped shape me into who I am today. Perhaps as you look back on your own work life and that first job that you had, there may be similar experiences. Last week, I had a phone conversation with someone who recently retired after 40 plus years in the workforce. And when I asked him how he was doing, he said retirement is difficult. And I was a little unsure of his answer, so I asked some additional questions. And he shared that it was difficult because his whole working life was built upon the identity of what he had done for his job and for his career, how he had performed, how he had fit into and contributed to the larger goals and purposes of the company, how he had mentored and led others, and how when he was working, his identity was directly linked to the contributions he gave to the whole of his company and also to his achievements. To be retired, he said, although a very good thing, stripped him of the identity he had built for himself. He had only been retired a few weeks, and the identity of what he did equaled who he believed he was. So without the purpose of getting up every morning and going to work and feeling valued, he discovered it was in fact difficult to begin the process of redefining himself outside of his work life. These transitions can question for us, or bring into question for us, who are we and how do we live and move and have our being in this world? Where is your identity rooted? Is it in your job title and how productive or efficient you are on a daily basis? Is it rooted in your achievement or your accomplishment? Or is it rooted in something deeper, in something else? We live in a fast-paced society, especially here in the Northeast, and around the world, American workers have a reputation for working longer hours than most other places in the world. The habit of working hard and of being seen as a team player has led many people to becoming a workaholic. We're so connected to our work through technology and those little devices we carry around in our pockets. We're connected to the global economy and world in such a different way today than 100 years ago. Excessive work in our culture is typically seen as a positive trait rather than a problem. Work habits, including overtime and long hours, often reward us, so it's no wonder we even seek that out. We're rewarded both financially and culturally in our society. You've probably experienced this in your own life. Those who are the last to leave the office are seen as the committed employees. But this reputation has been seen as negative from other countries in the world, and Europeans consider Americans and the typical American workload an ineffective use of time, if you can believe that. But not everyone in the world looks down on this American addiction to work. For years, China has implemented a 996 policy. Does anyone know what that is? The 996 policy is you show up at work at 9 in the morning, you leave at 9 at night, and you work 6 days a week. Chinese tycoon and mogul Jack Ma just last week endorsed this strategy and work-life plan again. He called it a blessing. And while there are young people in China who are pushing back against this work policy, he says it doesn't matter, because if they leave, there's a line of people ready to take their place. Busyness and productivity is seen as a banner of success. And the love of productivity in our culture so often defines our work life as adults. And I think it begins for us even when we're young. I knew the value of working hard on my paper route because I too had a reward with my paycheck. But think about how our culture tells our young people today that their identity is shaped by what they can do to get into college, by resume building activities, by constant social media connection, and by unceasing activity. Young people today don't know the value of rest and Sabbath. And for many of us adults, we struggle with that too. Our young people are also caught up in the push to stay busy and productive, to be productive members of our society. And when our identities as adults are rooted in our work, and more specifically in the productivity, efficiency, achievement, and accomplishment, we pass these values along to the next generation as well. And this work ethic, which many have come to know and live, often leads to an increased anxiety, increased stress level, and often burnout. As I look out at all of you, I know we each have different areas of work. Some of us go to paying jobs every day. Some of us spend our time volunteering. Some have families and their primary responsibility is raising children as a parent. And some of you, I know, are caring for your aging parents as a full-time job. So whether you're retired, working full-time, whether you're a parent, a caregiver, volunteer, whatever it might be that you do with the bulk of your waking hours, know this: God cares about your work. Work is a part of God's big picture, and our lives encompass many aspects of work. So think about this question. What difference does it make that you're a Christian in the workplace, or a Christian volunteering, or a Christian parent? Are you using what God has provided you with to the best of your potential in whatever way you're spending your time during the day? The wisdom of the Proverbs offers many practical reasons for us for being humble and acting honestly. Dishonest may produce a larger income and accolades on the short term, and we see dishonesty in the workforce often. but we also know that it will ruin one's reputation in the long run. Looking into the verses that Lucy read for us today, Proverbs 16:18 suggests that pride goes before destruction. You see, proper humbleness is not just a matter of our connection to others, but it's also a path towards godly wisdom. You see, the wisdom that we find in the Proverbs is not concerned with wealth or social status like we talked about last week, but rather it's concerned with one's moral and religious character. How do each one of us live our best life in this world today? Are we living into our God-given potential? Proverbs 20:17 says, bread gained by deceit is sweet, but afterward the mouth will be full of gravel. Quite vivid imagery here found in the Proverbs. And this suggests that someone can be enticed by a sweet deal. We've probably experienced this ourselves or seen others drawn to that thing that almost seems too good to be true. But this proverb is warning that once that deal is taken, the person has actually swallowed a bad deal. The bread is deceptive, the author says. Be wise. True godliness is incompatible with a deceptive lifestyle. Proverbs 24:33 addresses being lazy in the workplace. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. While being a workaholic is an extreme on one end, not showing up and participating in the work that you've been given and called to do is, on the other hand, also not great. This passage suggests a stationary or a static position, that there is a decision to be made to not make the effort today. And when we don't show up and we don't make the effort to what we've been given or called to do, our lives will stay in a stationary position as well. Work indeed takes effort, and laziness and a lack of diligence in the workplace can be destructive. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself when you're on a team working towards a common goal, and how frustrating and annoying it is when someone on your team doesn't pull the full weight, doesn't carry the share of their burden. Proverbs 12:18 talks about rash words that are like a thrust of the sword. Again, vivid imagery to communicate a plain truth. Using words and communication in some form is vital to all of our occupations. Whether you're a volunteer, a parent, a workforce person, whatever it might be in how you spend your daily waking lives, communication is a part of our jobs. And words can be hurtful. Once they are said, they cannot be taken back. We teach our kids this, not to say certain things, because once it's out there, it can't be called back in. But in our workplaces, words can be exchanged so quickly in reactivity. And when said in anger or frustration, they're often not so kind. My first job out of college, I learned how not to treat others by one of my colleagues who just found it his goal and purpose to berate and tear down everyone around him. Needless to say, he was not well liked among the team, and I learned how not to treat my coworkers. How we use words in the workplace was important to the author of Proverbs. So we can glean from that today for ourselves that it's important today as well. The second part of the verse which Lucy read goes on to say that the tongue of the wise brings healing. Our words matter, even in the workplace. As Christians, our call is to live out the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And we can only do this in the workplace when we control our tongue. Living differently than the way the world expects us to live includes not just avoiding angry speech or lashing out, but it's also an invitation to try and be the calming presence in the midst of chaos, in the midst of the boardroom, in the midst of the meeting, in the midst of the situation you find yourself in. Loving and kind words of encouragement can be a source of restoration and renewal, even in the workplace. Our final proverb today from chapter 12, verse 1 says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but those who hate to be rebuked are senseless." Discipline here can also be translated as correction, reproof, or instruction. Wise knowledge, it suggests, comes through verbal interaction that can include praise, but also critique and instruction. Our natural human tendency is to avoid being critiqued or to avoid being instructed. But a wise and humble worker knows that in order to grow, we must humbly accept feedback and be open to learning, that there's wisdom coming to us from others in our communities of work. Simply put, to grow in wisdom requires humility and an openness to learning. Perhaps we're not always the smartest person in the room, even when we think we might be. There's no doubt that our work habits shape our character, and that the wisdom at work brings life to all aspects of our life, including the workplace where we go, whether it's our home raising children or out in the world. Again, we spend our largest waking hours doing work. The wisdom found in the Proverbs regarding this work reminds us that challenges and opportunities in the workplace were as much a part of the ancient world as they are today. That vivid imagery that we read about carries over and stands the test of time. And one of the fundamental desires of being human, I think, is the desire that we all have for finding significance. And we need our lives to count for something, and we have a yearning in our hearts to live significantly. And this is why I think it's so easy to confuse our title and our responsibilities with our true identity, which is as a beloved child of God. We need to remember that the world of work and our place in it doesn't exist in a vacuum from the rest of our lives. And that if we do not ground our work and our priorities in our truest identity and in our relationship with the living God, then our lives and our work will be out of alignment. Is your work life in alignment with God's plans and purposes? Or does it feel a bit out of alignment? In just a moment, we are going to read and recite together wise words from the prophet Micah. And as you read these words, I invite you to consider them through the lens of the Proverbs and the wisdom at work. How to live justly, honestly, and humbly in all aspects of life, but most importantly, in the workplace. May we be people of justice and kindness and humility. May it be so. Amen.